There was a funeral being held, a small in true Bristol fashion. She hey, a severe feeling as though my lack of thorough attention was doing Matthew McConaughey a severe and was doing Matthew McConaughey a severe injustice. Okay. This is the first one. This is the first proper one. How cute. Okay. Before we begin, I'm not writing this book to make some song and dance about the experiences I've had. I'm not writing to compete with you or to invoke any comparison between our stories. You're on your own adventure, and I hope one day to read your book. I'm not writing in hopes of money or fame. Everyone, in time, receives all they deserve. This life is a gift, and I am here for the journey no matter where it takes me. I'm not writing to sell you a package holiday, or a getaway, or a mindfulness retreat. Far too many people these days mask their something to sell with their story to tell. No. I'm writing this book simply because if I had read this book before I embarked upon the trip around which it revolves, I would have left far sooner. In the months and years leading up to this journey, the predominant mantra resonating from the people around me was this: I wish to see the world, but have not the money to travel. Look, the best things in life are free. I am fortunate enough to have followed a path that had led to my hitching the length of France from Calais to Toulon 2 years prior to this trip. This, indeed, left me half prepared. For those of you with no such luck or prior experience, I'm here to tell you now. Leave. Pack your big bag, stick your thumb out, and leave. See things. Go places. Do stuff. Leave. This is the Hitchhiker's Manifesto. It's not dead. It's alive and kicking. We're not axe murderers or rapists, usually. We're artists. We're musicians. We're writers. Fuck trains. Fuck coaches. Fuck it all off. There are millions of empty seats just cruising around the country, the world. And their chaperones are surprisingly willing to have you fill them. It's free transport. In the UK, in Europe, in the States, everywhere I've seen so far. If you see us, pick us up. If you are us, one more car. I've got a good feeling. So that's the preface. Hi, my name's Isaac Ramsey. I'm 26 years old. When I was 20, I hitchhiked from LA to New York, 4,500 miles, 18 states, and this is the first chapter of the book about that. So each chapter as well comes with a Spotify scanny code, and each chapter has a definition at the top as well. Not necessarily a word that is in the chapter, but a nice new expansion of one's vocabulary that relates in spirit to the chapter. I'd been to Bristol before, many times. In fact, I'd lived there for the better part of a year, and despite taking a beating, I still held the city in high regard. I was age 16 when I hitchhiked for the first time to Bristol. I left North Wales with a close friend of mine who was not much older than myself, and it took us 3 days to make the journey. We made all the first-timer mistakes. We didn't craft our signs with intention, with care. We stood in short lay-bys, stretches of road with poor stopping room. We exited vehicles in cities and towns instead of service station hopping. My love-hate relationship with roundabouts began on this journey. They're a good bet if, and only if, the turning you're taking is followed by a good stretch of lay-by or hard shoulder. You can usually check this on satellite view on Google Maps. I began to see the benefit in rolling my sleeves up and making eye contact. I got used to standing at 45 degrees to the road to appear present but not imposing. I dipped my toe to the heel and was hooked. I can now comfortably complete the trail from Ruthin to Bristol by thumb in a day. If it's my final stop, I no longer bother bringing a tent along for the ride. I have choice service stations and go-to cardboard recycling bins for signage. Anyway, this story starts just before this story starts, in mid-May. The air was fluid and I hitched east out of my small Welsh town, flitting between cars, making my way down the country. Stood at a roundabout, just south of Bridgnorth, I graciously granted some lucky bastard the privilege of transporting me all the way to Gloucester. We had a good time, we exchanged some music, we bought me a coffee, and then we parted ways. Before too long, I was riding my last British hitch for at least 3 months. Hitchies, rides, chauffeurs, whatever you want to call them, I owe a great debt to these kind people. And they are kind people. I often get asked whether I'm afraid while hitching. And the answer is a resounding no. The closest analogy I can draw is to that of the lowly spider. They are just as scared of you as you are of them. Funny things, hitchies, but lovely creatures, every single one. In terms of an explanation regarding their decision to pull over, which they do often feel the need to provide, especially on long journeys, I have been offered many. One of my personal favourites is the absolute classic, God told me to do it. God's mint. He gets a bit of a tough rap these days, but to be fair to the guy, he's always had my back. And I'd like to note here that this is by no means exclusively the Abrahamic God. All sorts of deities seem to advocate my worthiness, and for that I am extremely grateful. Other popular justifications include, but are not limited to, I, my son, brother, father, used to hitchhike. I've always wanted to pick up a hitchhiker. You looked hot, cold, wet, tired, nice, sad. I don't know why I stopped. Rather offensive. And when I had my long blonde hair, I even had the pleasure of receiving a few, I stopped because I thought you were a girl, but I suppose I have to give you a lift now, don't I? Yes, you do. A teacher and myself came to a stop at the side of the road in St. Paul's at around 3 p.m, and I slid from the car. Wishing them all the best, I waved until they disappeared from view. There was a funeral being held at a small church on the back roads of Eastville, and I trailed the crowd down bricked walkways like cattle on a country lane until I could break off from the procession, down a side road, into a park where I rolled up the last of my weed. Hoping for an early night, preceding the coach journey to London, and significant jet lag sure to ensue following the Gatwick LAX flight, I called India, my ex-flatmate, with whom I was travelling to the States. I was unsure as to why she had invited me. We hadn't spoken in a while, and life had taken us each in rather opposing directions. I assumed it to either be for my world-renowned supernatural hitchhiking ability, or for my endless wit. Either way, Despite the excitement, I was somewhat nervous, and a tight knot was making its home in my stomach. Much to my disappointment, India was not at home preparing for the journey. Rather, in true Bristol fashion, she informed me that I'd be meeting her at a day rave at the Trinity Centre. A day rave, for those who are unsure, is a small gathering attended rather exclusively by people who would have been doing ketamine anyway, but would prefer it if loud music were involved. I managed to source some more marijuana from White Man with Dread, and I got high. Sat with some strangers atop a wooden garden installation, I was enveloped in warmth. People spoke through and around me as I sipped a cold cider and phased out in meditative thought. I remember the blossom of a cherry tree creeping into my eyeline as the wind buffeted it softly, and in no time at all, I was outside a pizza shop. Pizza shop, corner shop, home. I was relieved in making it back in time for a relatively early night. I followed India into her boyfriend's house, which was saturated with some kind of circus-related propaganda, informing me of some niche, clown-oriented genre of drum and bass. She showed off her rather weighty walking bag. I had only a backpack, sleeping bag, and tent with me. In terms of cash, we had about £2,000 between us. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, in all honesty. The plan we had agreed upon was get to LA, visit the desert and the Meow Wolf art exhibition, and that was about as detailed as it got. In hindsight, that is barely 3 weeks worth of plan. Never mind 3 months. But that's kind of just how I did things back then. The last thing I recall is watching some kind of heavy metal anime starring a rather garish cat, stumbling through into the living room and passing out on the sofa. I awoke in the dark to the sound of clinking, scuttling and showering. I slurped tea as I gathered my thoughts and gear. I carried India's far heavier bag, and she took my backpack, tent and sleeping bag hanging by reflective strapping to the underside. We arrived at the bear pit in plenty of time, and yet still managed to miss our coach. Thankfully, knowing our nature, we had left room for error in our schedule. And so, in booking a fresh set of tickets, we boarded the next megabus without issue, as the pastel light of morning filtered in through the cracks in the skyline. I cannot stomach flying from anywhere other than the cheapest airport available. I would rather hitchhike to London, spend a night sleeping beneath a metal bench, blag Costa for tap water and eat bin food than pay for a flight from Bristol. We hopped off the coach and, with just a touch more wiggle room left in the schedule, stopped at a Subway. I caught a falling pickle in the sauce marbled wrapping. Conversation turned to food. What is an In-N-Out burger? How good is New Mexican food? What is a corn dog? To this day, I could still not tell you what lies behind door number 3. A train from Victoria delivered us into the welcoming arms of Gatwick Airport. Now, I am working class and from a small Welsh town. I had been abroad 5 times preceding this journey, once with high school to Nîmes, a further twice, again to France by thumb, 1 week in Amsterdam for an 18th birthday, and a short excursion to a Valencian hostel. I had never stared a 3-month escape directly in the eyes before. Neither I nor the States blinked. I had not been the booker of flights. India had taken care of this formality, and for that I am grateful. I would not, 100% would not, have opted for the inclusive food and drink. India, however, informed me as we passed through security that we would be dining on beef dinner and red wine. You've nothing to fear if you've nothing to hide. Estes and passports in order, we boarded the plane. We cruised at high altitude. I talked my way into a few extra wines and a free pair of headphones. We cruised at high altitude. I talked my way into a few extra wines and a free pair of headphones. Eventually, sick of half-heartedly absorbing the general outline of Interstellar, and honestly feeling as though my lack of thorough attention was doing Matthew McConaughey a severe injustice, I opted instead to watch the little GPS plane on the TV. As it made its journey up over the Arctic Circle, I closed my eyes. There you go. That's it. That's the preface and the first chapter of my book. Let me just, so what have I edited here? So here, before too long, I was in my last ride. I changed to, before too long, I was riding my last British hitch for at least 3 months. Because it wasn't my last ride. Makes it sound like I died. My last British hitch. For 3 months, it's not my last ride. Many more rides to come. I feel like it gave it more direction, more longevity by changing that. I changed. A teacher and I pulled up in St. Paul's to a teacher and myself came to a stop at the side of the road in St. Paul's at around 3 p.m. I don't know. It just feels like this is one thing I was saying on my TikTok. Like when I'm editing a book, if I heard someone telling the story in a pub, would I stop and try and listen in? So I mean, and that's what I'm kind of going for. And here as well, there was a funeral being held at a small church on the back roads of Eastville, and I trailed them down brick walkways until I could break off from the procession, blah blah blah, to park where my last spliff. So I added the like cattle on a country lane, because that's how that feels to me, and I'm just trying to put a bit of my roots, my hometown in it as well. Like I know not a lot of people will vibe with that, but the people who do will appreciate it, and that's what that was for. Like I trailed the crowd down brick walkways like cattle on a country lane until I could break off from the procession. Like anyone that can ring bells for, I want to ring those bells. A few little hads, a little bit of a little bit of past tense, present tense switching. I do that a lot. When I go into the descriptive, I put a little bit of present tense in. I don't know if it feels like it brings presence. I added that paragraph a lot. I added from Buffer did it softly in no time at all. I was outside a pizza shop. I added pizza shop, corner shop, home. I was relieved to make it back in time for a relatively early night. I wanted to just tie that pizza shop into the I followed India into her boyfriend's house, which was saturated with some kind of circus-related propaganda, informing me of some niche clown-oriented genre of drum and bass. I just wanted to take us from pizza shop there. I know a lot of the time you don't need to do that, but I thought for the sake of one sentence, I thought I'd tie those two together. Like a lot of the time I will just take us from, jump out a car, now I'm pitching my tent up. If there's nothing important, and that wasn't important, but I felt like it didn't flow as well as it could have done. The missing the coach bit I changed loads. I changed it from, although we arrived at the bear pit in plenty of time, we missed the coach. I'm not sure how, but we managed it. A brief panic and another coach booking later, we were aboard, Victoria bound. And that was changed completely to, we arrived at the bear pit in plenty of time, and yet still managed to miss our coach. Thankfully, knowing our nature, we had left room for error in the schedule, and so, in booking a fresh set of tickets, we boarded the next megabus without issue, as the pastel light of the morning filtered in through the cracks in the skyline. It's just better. It's just better. Not sure how, but we managed it. That was 20-year-old me. So I mean, like this was originally written Obviously this is on like 5th draft now, but there's still some little bits of 20, 21-year-old Isaac who got back, and everyone was like, write that book. And then the first 5 chapters got done pretty quick, and then obviously the plan got done pretty quick. Second draft of the plan got done pretty quick. Thank God I did the second draft of the plan when I was 21. Otherwise I would not have been able to write this book as well as I have at all. He really put the groundwork in, and passed Isaac for once. And yeah, that was pretty much it. There was loads of little edits, but they were the main bits and why. Yeah, thank you for entertaining this. And I hope that's given you what you need to know whether you want to subscribe and come back next week. That's my writing style. Like I said, I switch into present tense a lot when I'm doing descriptive. I do this. I used to do it badly and incoherently, and my English teachers were not happy with it. But now I feel like I've got it to the point where, although it's not technically correct, it feels right. It didn't used to feel right, but I think it feels right now. It feels like how I talk, how I'd explain things. Yeah, that's chapter 1. And yeah, come back next week. By all means, come back next week. Thank you for your time. Yeah, so this is going to keep being free up until halfway through the book, and then I'm going to move over to Patreon. Second half of the book is going to be on Patreon, and then once that's done, anyone who subscribed for the Patreon is going to go on my special mentions page, and then as soon as I've got that list of people, it's going to get published. I'm going to publish it to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. I know it's a bit of a weak move, but to get an agent these days, they really want you to have quite a significant online following. So, but yeah, so the book's going to be available to purchase in like November. Paper copy, hard copy, or Kindle. Yeah. Thank you again for joining me. I hope this has got you excited, because it's got me excited. Share stuff and do things. See you on Sunday.